All right. So as you can see, this is a M16A4. It's kind of too big and my camera setup's a little shitty. But as you can see, you got the FN markings. Property, U.S. government, M16A4, caliber 5.56 millimeter, blah, blah, blah. Manufactured, Columbia, South Carolina, blah, 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 blah. Even has safe, semi, and burst engraved. And 20-inch outer, 12-inch Knight's Ornament clone wrist system. But yeah, so I did have this. Long story short, this was a Daytona M16A4 before, but I just redid it by having this new receiver with the correct engravings, as well as a actual steel outer barrel. So this is steel instead of aluminum like the other one. So it has a lot more rigidity and nice heft to it. Also, nice clean new body and proper markings, because that's me. I like clones. Let me just disconnect it from the airline. So this, obviously, if you know a little bit about Daytonas, especially the GMP or the M4 systems, they only go into gas blowback bodies. This is the GMP one. Just because I had more experience with GMP in the past, I already have a lot of their parts. I'm familiar with how they go together and this and that. Plus, I just don't like WE, so I have a GMP Daytona. Because originally, if you look like over a year ago, you'll see a build series where I built a Daytona M16A4 with a 3-round burst trigger group, and it was a regular gas blowback with gas mags. It wasn't HPA because I wasn't into HPA then. But this is pretty much it, really. Just the only thing that's left that's actually from my original GMP M16A4 build is the rails and the buffer tube and butt stock. That's literally it. That's all that's left over. The old receiver's gone. Obviously the old outer barrel's gone. All that is all gone. So pretty much the only thing that's left now are just the external parts. But yeah, so let me just take it apart. This will sort of be almost like a review of a Daytona. I'm gonna bring this out of frame for a little bit because I need to punch out these pins because they're still really stiff in there because it's a new receiver. So that's a good thing. Oh man, hopefully I don't cut myself. I'm using my knife to, oh man, that pin's in there. Whew, these pins are really stiff. That's a good thing. There we go. Bring it back over. So, I have the pin out. And I will now show you how to take these apart. I'm sure there's already a bunch of videos on how to do this, maybe. But like an AEG, you do not pull out the rear pin, you only do the front pin. And like an AEG, it just sort of slides forward. So, first thing, you can go over the lower. I'm not going to get into whole GMP gas blowback. This is just going to be more towards Daytona. But as you see, the rear pin, which usually holds, well, on an AEG would hold the gearbox in, but on a gas blowback, it's like a real steel holds the rear of the upper on. But this brass piece is your air valve. This is where the air, when you pull the trigger, the air comes out of here and into the bolt. And as you see, it's big, so it encompasses the rear of the receiver since there's no more lug. Just sort of like a gearbox encompasses the, or holds in the upper receiver in the rear. As for modifications, depending on how you run your airline, since I ran it out the back, I'm not going to take the stock off, but I had to drill through the end of the receiver to allow the air hose to screw into the air valve. I used like a, I think I used like a, I don't remember what size drill bit. I drilled it obviously more enlarged just so there's more room around the threaded part of the hose. But it's like a half-inch, about a half-inch drill bit I had to use to drill a hole. And then the only other thing you have to modify to the receiver is in the front, like an AEG, there's a cutout for the feed tube of the hop-up unit. So you have to cut that out so it slides into place, or else if you don't, you're gonna have a really bad angle and you're not gonna get it on. You're just gonna bend or fuck up something. Other than that, installing it, maybe in the future when my friend gets his Daytona kit for his GMP M16, I'll do more in-depth on how to actually install the parts into the receiver. It's pretty straightforward. The old valve knocker assembly here, which holds the bolt catch, other than that, the GMP kits come with a new bolt catch for the bolt to interface with a KW8 ERG magazine, so that you have to replace. But that's just, there's no cutting or dremeling needed. You're just popping out some pins and screws, so that's pretty easy. Other than that, I will say it slides in, but it doesn't really slide in. You definitely have, there's a little bit of finessing and moving parts around to get it in, but you get the hang of it. It's pretty easy. You just need to, there's certain little things you gotta look out for. You can't just shove it in. But that is the lower. Use a little closer up of the engravings. So I put that off to the side. Then we can get to the upper. The upper, as you see, you need to get rid of the rear boss, for the pin boss or whatever you want to call it, because this was a gas blowback. It's not an AEG upper, it's a gas blowback upper. So you have to cut that out. And pretty much, take the bolts out and everything. Pretty much you just cut it out. It's pretty easy. I didn't even file it. I just cut it out with a oscillating tool because it's only aluminum. So it was quick work with the oscillating tool and I just cut it right out. Other than that, there's real no, oh, well, yeah, there is one more. You have to drill a hole and sort of cut out a little channel in the front, because if you see down in that hole, I know it's a little dirty with the metal dust, but there's a set screw down there and that is your hop-up adjustment screw. So you do have to drill, and sometimes if your barrel nut comes further back on the receiver, you do sometimes have to cut a little notch in the barrel nut so you can get your Allen key in there. It's a 2.5 millimeter Allen key. But I had my old receiver, I did have to, the barrel nut, I did have to sort of cut a little notch out because it did go far back. It did go back far enough where the Allen key was getting interrupted. So, but this one, I haven't. And that's pretty much for modifications to the upper. But yeah. Can look at the bolt. I'm not going to take it apart really, but there's this brass piece in here that's moving a little bit back and forth. That is your bolt tank. That's your expansion chamber. So you have the air comes in through that hole there, through the air valve I showed you on the lower. It goes through, comes out the end, pushes the BB out. At the same time, there's air filling up in this brass tank, which is then expanding and pushing on this. It's kind of dirty as you see, pushing against this, so that it's being pushed out. It wants to be pushed out, this brass piece. So that wants to be pushed out, but it's hitting against the hop-up unit, causing a rearward motion, because this is not movable, this is immovable, this is movable. So that is then being pushed back and cycling. If you're having bolt lock issues on your GMPs, this little ledge right here, It's a very small ledge, but that is where it's actually locking. So you just take a little file to make sure that it's a nice square surface. I might have to do that soon, actually, because mine's starting to be a little sensitive and touchy with the bolt lock. But that is your bolt. Standard charging handle. You can continue to use the GMP charging handle, which I recommend against, because even with a regular gas blowback system, it was breaking the GMP aluminum charging handle. So what I did was I got a real steel, and with the real steel you have to shave this down so it clears the top of the bolt, and then on the sides where you have the lugs for keying into the receiver, since the Daytona, for the GMP receivers, they don't have that lug like the real steel or some other gas blowbacks do. You have to file those down. It's really simple stuff. A lot of it's straightforward. Nothing too crazy. A lot of this stuff you don't even have to like precisely measure and cut. Like even the hole for the top, I mean, you get a general idea where it is, so you don't have to be there with calipers measuring it and making sure it's precise, because at the end of the day, you're just drilling a hole for access to that screw. It's not a hole for the screw. So you can even oversize that hole just a little bit. If you're off by a little bit, you can just drill it out a little bit bigger, so you have which is actually what I did on this one. Is, you see I drilled it a lot bigger than the actual screw hole. So, but yep, that's it. We'll go to putting it back together, just like a AEG. Slide it on. This pin is stiff. It's really stiff. I'm not even gonna push it all the way through, mate. I will. There we go. So on to the magazines. Now Daytona, they take AEG magazines. For the GMP one, I did have to file quite a bit from the mag well, so these KWA ERG mags will fit. Depends what mags you want to use. Just remember, if you want the bolt lock on last round, like when you fire your last round, the bolt stays open and locked to the rear. If you want that feature, you need to use the KWA ERG magazines for the RM4 series, because that has that little cutoff lever, as you see in the rear. This little cutoff lever. That cutoff lever for on the AEG stops the whatever circuitry from firing the gearbox. For Daytona is what pushes up on the bolt catch. So you need to, if you want to use the bolt lock system, you need to use these type of magazines. They come in a few different varieties. These are the 30/60 P mags. They have other types. And also, depending, even if you don't care about the bolt lock, you can use any other AEG mag. Depending on what mag you want to use, maybe you don't need to file, maybe you do need to file, or you need to file more than I had to. So just keep that in mind. You will definitely probably have to file out the mag well. For most of the mags I've tested in this gun, I've either had to file to fit these. For other mags, like especially the Stenag style steel magazines, those seem to want to be filed even more than these. So I didn't even bother. I just use these anyway because they have the bolt lock feature. There you go. It's still a little stiff because it's still pretty new. I didn't want to make it too loose. So here you go. There's your bolt lock. And then you push on the bolt release. Boom. So that is that. Let me plug in the air. I'll do a little shooting for you guys just so you can see it operating. Take the mag out just so it doesn't keep locking back. But yeah, so on semi, little burst. There you go. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the fire selector does need some modification too to clear the firing levers. They do go over this on the website. There's videos on it and pictures on what modification. It's just a simple filing a notch into it. It's nothing major. But yeah, that's the other modification for the lower, but that's just for the fire selector. Anyway, no, it won't close. You can, if you take your time, you can file this a little flatter and modify it a little bit to make it so it closes. I'll do that sometime in the future, but for now, I don't really care. But that is a Daytona M16 or AR, whatever you want to call it. This is just my M16A4 clone. If you have any questions, you can either comment or you can go on Facebook. There's a whole owners group for Daytonas, or on their website. You can message them on Facebook. They have very good customer service. They're always very willing and very fast to respond to any questions you have. Overall, so any questions you have, if you can't get it answered on the Facebook group or by me, you can always message them on Facebook. That's the best way I get a hold of them. But yeah.